This video is going to cover the topic of making zero. Be sure the date and topic are at the top of your page. The essential question for this video is, what does the additive inverse property tell us about making zero? And before we get too far, let's review a few things from last year, and to do that I'm going to draw a quick number line. So first things first, when we are looking to the right of the number line, we are looking at positive numbers. And of course, when we are looking to the left of zero, we are looking at negative numbers. The other thing we want to make sure we remember from our previous work is that the distance a number is from zero is measured in units and is known as the absolute value. And you may or may not recall that absolute value is indicated by these lines, right? This symbol is the absolute value symbol. So for example, we would be looking for the absolute value of 7 if we have 7 with those bars on either side of it. And as a measurement, absolute value is always positive. So for example, let me change colors here. For example, if we have the number 6, right, and I want to know the absolute value of number 6, well, if I see how far it is from 0, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces away from 0, so it is still 6. But on the other hand, if I have the absolute value of negative 6, right, here's negative 6 on my number line. If I'm counting the number of units, I would still count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The absolute value of negative 6 would also be 6, right? Which brings us to one more reminder of a vocabulary term from last year, and that is opposites. When two numbers have the same absolute value, like these two do, right, those are known as opposites. So for example, let me change colors to green here. For example, 4 and negative 4 would be known as opposites because they are the same distance from 0, just in the opposite directions. So they would be known as opposites. They have the same absolute value in different directions. Now that we've had that quick review, we're going to add on to our work from last year to think about making zero. And we want to have this as a reference as we work with integers this year. And just a quick reminder about integers. Integers represent a group of numbers, and it happens to be the group of numbers that are any whole number, right? Like 1, 5, 27, and their opposites. So -1, -5, and -27. So just a reminder there about the term integers that we'll be using quite a bit. When we're adding integers together, right, especially, well, let's talk specifically about adding opposites together. It's almost like there's a tug of war along the number line. So if I wanted to add, let's say 6 and -6, right? I'm adding opposites. 6 and -6 are opposites. One is pulling me to the right 6 units, and the other one is trying desperately to pull me to the left 6 units. But in the end, they cancel each other out, right? If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units to the right, but then another force is pulling me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units back to the left, I end up back where I started at 0. And this is always true, and there's a mathematical term for this. We call this the property of the additive, as in adding, inverse, as in opposites, so adding opposites. Which means that if we add 5 plus a -5, the opposite, we know that's automatically going to be 0. Or 11 plus -11, we automatically know that will be 0. And I can use my variables that we did in algebra to represent this as well. So we could say n, as in any number, plus the opposite of any number, will always equal 0. And that n could represent anything, right? 72, 95, whatever it is. If I add the opposite to it, it will always equal 0. And we can see this with real world story problems as well. So make sure you jot down these examples. So for example, if the temperature is outside a freezing -10 degrees, how much would the temperature need to change to get to 0? Well, the opposite of -10 is 10. So if we were at -10, we would have to go up an extra +10, the opposite, to make it back to 0. And if, for example, I have $25, the question would be, what needs to happen for me to end up with 0? Well, my money could fall out of my wallet, I could buy something, I could give it away. In all of these situations, we would be represented with a -25, the opposite of 25, and that would mean I would end up with 0. And before you finish your notes, I want you to fill in the missing part of a few number sentences, and be sure to have them filled in when I check your notes. So make sure you jot these 4 number sentences down and have the lines filled in so I can make sure that you're following along and paying attention here. And then remember that the essential question of the video was, what was the additive inverse property and what does it tell us about making 0? And of course, what we know now is that any number and its opposite add up to 0.